Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. My name is Tess Luda, and it's my great pleasure and privilege to introduce my colleague, Janice Marriott, and ask her to present the 28th Storylines Margaret Mahy Medal. With experience in broadcasting, teaching and librarianship, Janice burst onto the New Zealand children's literature scene in 1989 with a book called Letters to Leslie, that many of us will remember. The first of around 20 children's books and many school readers. Several of her publications have picked up national awards and been honoured with Storylines notable books. The gardeners among us will know her as the writer of very appealing books and many magazine columns about gardening. Janice has held literary residencies in Dunedin, Auckland and Foxton, and for many years her day job was producing audio books for Learning Media, those Kiwi Kids Songs books, known in probably every primary and intermediate school in the country. But a lesser-known feature of Janice's career has been the supportive work of other writers. More than 2 decades' experience as a creative writing teacher, judge, manuscript assessor, editor, and mentor to many a writer. This contribution, added to her own body of writing, is this year being acknowledged by the coveted Storylines Margaret Mahy Medal. And Janice, I'd like to come and get Margaret Mahy Medal. Prime Minister, Minister for Arts, Culture and Heritage, Jacinda Ardern, Margaret Mahy Awards Committee, and the Storylines team. Tēnā koutou, and thank you for having me. And hello to everybody out there. I feel you're all supporting me today, and I'm very, very moved by it. Of course, we all think of Margaret at this time. I must say, I remember a very riotous children's writers' evening, or weekend I think it was, where Diana Noonan and I ended up in a sparkle, an outdoor sparkle, late at night. And suddenly Margaret loomed out of the steam air, quoting P.G. Woodhouse. The only way I can honour Margaret, who cloaked New Zealand with a gift of words, rich words, and who addressed those words to children, is to use this opportunity to talk about words, the gift of words, to Antamariki. I think it was either Tessa or Lorraine Day who invented the phrase, the word witch, for Margaret. It's a great word for her. I couldn't have an image in my mind when I was thinking of what to say. So I thought I'd start with a poem called The Word Witch's Gift. She stares and stirs the slurry of words, adding more and more and more words, from dilution to even distribution to saturated solution, a potion to crystallize around the children she loves best, as protective as sparkling as a neutral vest. Every day in the Word Witch's house, words drip in a child's amazing ear, and onto his silken eyelids when he closes them to smile. Words slide slowly down his nose ridge, his wide nose ridge, and nestle in grooves by his nostril caps. Words wander on his felted cheeks and land on his perfect puckered mouth. And these, the last luscious lingering words, are the words that will fill his belly
and these are the words he will speak. As he grows, he throws out the words that blanket him at bedtime. He dresses in words and walks in his world of words. He uses his word armour at school and in the wild. He has under his bed a wakahuia full of very special words. And the word rich, there are many men who stare and stir the slurry of words, adding more and more and more words, a potion for the children they love best, as protective as sparkling as, only through a vest. I must apologise for the fact that the use of the male pronoun in this talk. My muse is male, I can do nothing about that. I'm going to talk about the gift of words rung by rung on the literacy ladder. So it's listening, it's language, it's story, reading, and writing. Giving the gift of words to children starts with teaching them to listen. Lullabies, nursery rhymes, songs. Some of you will know just how important listening skills are to me. Having produced Kiwi Kid songs for 15 years, and having recorded so many stories and poems and plays in English, Maori, all Pacific Island languages, or most Pacific Island languages, for the Ministry of Education, my adult life has been fueled by the desire to get children to listen, to sounds, to music, to meaning. An aside, I must tell you this aside. One of the things I am most proud of is my attribution to Margaret of the lyrics of Dance All Around the World. Remember that song? It's the chart-topping blurter song from 1972. It was her picture book, The Procession, which was published in 1969, from which the lyrics were taken. I knew this because my mother-in-law was a rampant and serious collector of children's books and librarian. And through her, I owned all of Margaret's earliest books. So, when we recorded our version of Dance All Around the World, I wrote in the book notes to Kiwi Kid Songs the formal attribution to Margaret to set the record straight. Kiwi Kid Songs production stopped suddenly when the Ministry of Education decided it was no longer needed. My grandson, who is here today, is probably the only child in the whole land who has his own complete copy of them. 150 songs. We hope the Ministry of Education will soon need more songs for Kiwi classrooms. So, after giving the gift of listening, we give the gift of language. We own the world when we have words to describe it, just as we own the pets that we name. We must give our children the ability to name their world, their feelings, their needs. I help at the local school. I can unlock a child's sense of humour, which is their imagination, by asking them to come up with a made-up name, it's usually a ridiculous name, for themselves. I give them one too. They love it, especially the newly arrived non-English speaking child. The naming of themselves, then the naming of things, is the first step they take to creating their own world with language. This is important even for children who don't go on to read and write, and there are some of those. With fluency in language, there is rarely a need for violence. power and maid. I hope your stay in hospital, he had written, is spectacular. He was the best word he knew, and it is a very good word for such an important message. Spectacular, it was. He has a bulging kettle of words. It's all I can provide him with to survive in the uncertain future that his generation faces. I teach him how words are made. I give him at least one bright and shiny or mysteriously dented and dirty word every day. I have a bandage over my eyes and he asks, "Grandma, can you still be I without eyes?" Then we're in a checkout at the supermarket. "Grandma, I know a courtyard is called that because it's where we catch balls. But why do we get a receipt at the checkout when we are always standing up and there's no chair here?" I'm still processing the genius of courtyard for catching balls. Grandma, are you listening to me? I am always listening to you. He is playing with his cats. The radio news is on. What is incarceration? Is it being locked in a car? No. If people are incarcerated, are they cut with a bread knife? You're one to work that one out. No. What is it like being incinerated? No, that means burnt. Are they burnt because they've been really bad? And so it goes. It is pointless struggling to read words if we're not used to describing the world using words. Let's not expect children to want to learn to read if they haven't learned that language is a tool they can use to explore, explain, and hopefully change their world. We must help them build that world for themselves, word block by word block. Then, when their listening ears are buzzing with words, they can step to the next rung, which is story. Story is a gift not given lightly, to quote Chris Mox. Just words, freely given in the dark from adult to child. For babies and tiny children, the transfer of the word which is gift is physical, mouth to mouth, skin to skin, mouth to ear. A book or an iPad at that stage can get on the way. I like to think storytelling was the reason language developed its sophistication in the first place. Just imagine, when hunters and gatherers returned to the cave 250 years ago with meat, fruit, seeds, and experiences to share. As our minds began to wonder and think, we had to tell stories. You should have been there. You'll never guess what happened. We all do it, passing the word which is gift as story to those who will outlive us. Here's another poem. It's called Touch and Tell. There is always light in the bedroom. Even while the child is sleeping, there is a moon-shaped nightlight. But I remember the nights, the long, long ago nights, when the fire had died down, the cave mouth was filled with dogs, and I was a child at the back, feeling rock above me. No matter what terror woke me in the night, I couldn't remove it with a beam of light. Cuddle me, I cried, and they did. Sing to me, I begged, and they did. Tell me a story, I pleaded, and they did. Each dawn that came, we had survived. So had our stories, so had our songs. Now they vibrate in the sunlight like gongs. Telling stories, expressing fear, just recounting events, laughing, all unite the family, the tribe. Stories are always an act of sharing and caring. Whether in caves long ago or cities now, the storytelling uses any medium it can to communicate, from arrow marks in blood on stone to YouTube videos. Stories define us, shape us, make us. Not every culture in the world is literate, but every culture tells stories and sings songs. And here's another more modern poem that tries to explain what story does. It's called Night Light. I lift his tense body, making sure the special blanket is wrapped round him and not caught in the ruck of Eden. I stagger to the couch in the bay window, half of which is bathed in street lamplight, a soft white on a tired grey upholstery. 4 a.m. Quiet. No cars on the road. I massage his plump feet and sing the cramp away. 4:15. Still no cars, not one. Is that better now? I asked my grandson. Tell me a story. He smiles, eyes shut. And I do. These stories are about the mystery of being safe in a dangerous world. They're about domesticity and adventure, love and hate. I hope they explain the child's own world to him. They are made up on the spot and never repeated. Give a child a story, and I hope she will take the story and mould it to suit her own understanding of the world. Story is a bag. It changes shape depending on whatever you put into it. The word created has the same root as creature, so it implies alive, changeable. I'm increasingly feeling that story should be interactive, as I think it used to be. Here's an example of what I mean. In the pouring rain, some time ago, a long time ago, we huddled undercover in our courtyard, and I taught the toddler about Noah's Ark. I went inside to make lunch, and he stayed there and he built a raft and gangplank. He showed it to me. See, Grandma? He's loading the ark now, 2 by 2. 2 Toyota, biggest fire engines to ever. Right, I said. What's that rescue helicopter doing on deck? Dad, go out to get the olive branch. The concept of rescue, relief, is there, transformed from a duck to a chopper. Children instinctively update myth to find meaning. Our very nation is a gift from storytelling seafarers. Its name, Aotearoa, indicates how we are seen in the sea. The name tells other sailors what to look for, how to find us. Explorers, sailors, fishing people are necessarily storytellers. They pass stories down the generations about icebergs, new islands, fish. I am sure this information was conveyed by story and wildlife just as much as by the stars. 250 years ago, yes, exactly that, two of the greatest seafaring peoples met on Kaiti Beach, Maui and the crew of the Endeavour. We are still harvesting the sea wrap of stories from this meeting of two cultures separated from each other by half the globe, misunderstood often by each other, but united by their use of story and their understanding of its power. Storytelling is not about ownership, authorship, or copyright. It's initially about family and love. What did you do today? It's an invitation to tell a story. It means I'm interested in you. You are important to me. Stories are free, like sunshine, and as necessary. Being a story creator is not a special skill. All of us tell stories. We all gossip in cafes, on the buses, and women's loos on Saturday nights. The Greeks have a god of gossip, Ossa. I'm concerned that in our professional world, where everyone has something called a role, and is an expert at something, and hires other experts at other things to do those other things for them, we regard storytellers as astonishingly superhuman, like surgeons and accountants and plumbers and prime ministers. But not so. Everyone has stories to tell, and the important stories are personal. Joy Cowley, who it is sad for me that she isn't here today, she is the queen of the Storylines. I'd like to pay tribute to her. Joy, I heard her just recently on Radio New Zealand, and please a shout out to that fantastic Waka Huia story that is Radio New Zealand. She was doing an interview and she said that her great-grandchildren tell her stories over the phone and she writes them down. Marvellous, as John Campbell would say. For a young child, their own story creation and storytelling is more important than reading. It comes before reading. A teacher I work with emailed, in our school, where over 70% of the children are English language learners, the biggest factor in their progress to English has been their learning to tell their own stories. And children have many ways of telling stories, not necessarily verbal. Children can tell stories through theatre, drawing, dance, costume, lives, and song. When he was 3, I told my grandson about the 3 little pigs and their house building. He went outside and made 3 piles, one of grass, one of bits of wood, and one of brick. I have a very untied gown. But I nearly spoiled it when I tried to remove the teetering piece of brick from the top of the brick house. No, said the angry child, that's important, that's a chimney. Of course, there would be no story if there were no chimney for the wolf to walk on. I knew then that he knew what story was. Storytelling involves interaction between the teller and the listener. For example, at home we reversion Grimm's fairy tale miracles and Greek myths. He really accepts my ideas, and I always accept his. But the gifts that the baby Sleeping Beauty might receive will be lifelong diesel and mining digger, rather than music and the power to dance. Snow White's coffin will be on a wide load truck going down Mount Eden Road with sirens, left and right. And Phil Goff, just think about the traffic jam. I always want to make up funny stories, but Tane prefers them terrifying with a gloomy ending. And sometimes the stories end very abruptly before they've begun. We're rushing through my garden. I might be the giant chasing Jack. I've almost caught Jack, but he phones the police and I'm immediately arrested, and that's the end of that. This raises the issue of technology requiring us to develop new stories, new myths, entirely new adventures we can have in this overprotecting world where GPS can track your whereabouts. You can never get lost. You can never escape from parental supervision. It's a huge topic, but not for today. Tell your own stories to your children. Everyone can do it. You will be teaching your child to visualize, to empathize, to retain information, and to listen. This is important now, because with attention spans getting shorter and words rarely existing separate from pictures, the visualizing that is essential to a satisfying reading experience is an unassessed and unvalued skill and can't be taken for granted. Tane and I are both grown-ups now. He goes to school, and I struggle to create stories relevant to our era, using any available medium. He chooses his own books now and reads them. He threw George's marvellous medicine into the rubbish bin to show his disgust at how Roald Dahl portrayed grandmother. We have learned that books can be dangerous. Of course, I do actually love Roald Dahl, who writes or wrote as though he was speaking. I just think that's an example of a book that was age inappropriate, and it hasn't got to the stage yet of believing grandparents can be anything but perfect. Back to the rhymes in the literacy lab. Okay, so we've got listening, language, story, and then comes reading. Now, I know that print is embedded in me like old metal type in one of those coins that it used to be kept in. But I also know there are many other ways of telling stories, and that print can limit our imaginations. So here's a poem exploring my adult ambivalence towards print. It's called In and Out of Print. I don't want you at 4 to learn to read. Not yet. But you love magnetic letters on the fridge. Why did I put them there? Watch me write. D for Daddy. Straight back, sticky out hook. Like that. M is Mummy. Up, down, breasts. G, I hope I've got these round the right way. G is Grandma, sitting with a lap. Stop, don't do it. Be in no hurry to see the world through a locust storm of writing. Let us share stories told in the dark from the heart, giants, trolls, wolves, and warriors fighting. Else you may spend your childhood pulling wobbling words behind your finger, left to right. Cat, sat, met. And where is the magic in that? When you are a student, studying monarch butterflies, how he taps his legs, waves his antenna, polka dot thorax pulsing, rumpled wings hanging, and then smoothing out into a fully spread sail, and then flying away, aflame in the blue. Please don't remember this in the exam room abyss, as printed facts on a screen inside your head, and you worried by the spelling of chrysalis. Drown in the book. Look around you. Try to see red wheelbarrows or plums in the fridge without seeing them in print. It is too late for me. I'm musing in this poem around the idea of being too literate. Some of us adults have this condition. We seek all our reassurance and knowledge from books, instead of from other people or from inside ourselves. Print can take away our instinctive creativity, and children's too. Everything has to be in balance and at the right time. Please don't rate children's progress on their reading ability alone. I'm not saying don't teach children to read, of course I'm not. I'm just asking you to think of the possibility that storytelling comes first for a child before reading and writing. I want to put that high-stepping, neck-plunging horse that is the love of language and the power of words back in front of the golden carriage that is picture books. After storytelling comes the next round, literacy. Learning to read books are useful, essential tools, and New Zealand pioneered them. We have an amazing history of success with literacy books. I'm very proud of it. I have written me, Joy is the world's expert in this genre, who has always managed to tell a story, usually with humour, then never insignificant. She is a genius who writes from inside a child's mind. As a child navigates the scaffold of literacy readers, it's important that they don't lose sight of the prize, which is the enjoyment of reading. So, to redress the balance from the previous poem, here's a short one about the transformative power of reading. You have to see this poem in my head. It's called Transformed by What He Digests. They are doing monarch butterflies at school. I do apologise for all these monarch butterflies. They are doing monarch butterflies at school. The caterpillars rear, swivel and stretch, turning their leaf pages slowly. After school, on the couch, the boy lies long, black shorts and black and white top, and big, brightly coloured book wide open in front of him. He has emerged from the classroom cocoon and morphed into a butterfly. The child is reading a book that someone has written. Anyone of you? I finally worked out how to mix together my skills of listening, storytelling, reading, writing and teaching, and come up with a potion that I hope will help others to perfect their writing skills through my Go Right Now business. I think that's a contribution I can make, because I'm always thinking not just of the toddler with the wide open eyes listening to a story, but also to that butterfly child, that child flapping the wide open wings of their book, reading. They need great books. We need the published stories of our children to be as compelling and mysterious and moving as the first stories they heard in the dark by their loved ones. I'm confident we have those books in New Zealand now. Books in which writers continue Margaret's work, gifting our land with a colorway of new words, new stories to describe this diverse, beautiful, innovative and gutsy nation. I'm also aware that thanks are due to dedicated publishers and booksellers of children's books, grants for writers from universities and creative museums, the Society of Authors with its mentoring scheme, awards for authors, all run by volunteers. It's through these networks that writers can produce their books and still eat the odd crust of bread. Thanks are especially due to librarians and teachers who day in, day out imbue our children with a love of reading and of luscious words, who know how to choose the local tales that bring smiles to the faces of our town. Now, as I started with a tribute poem to Margaret, I'm going to end with another little one. It's called Strike Rate. It was simple sowing the big seeds, not so simple weeding and watching them grow. No, Tane, don't pull that out. We have to wait. What a word, that horrible A sound. Waiting to cross the road to the playground, waiting for dinner to cook, waiting to grow. When the vines were Tane's height, coy white flowers turned them into bonneted people. Then the pods, dangling like cocoons. We took the first one in summer. On the blue cloth, it looked like a pea-green boat with a proud crown. I unzipped it. The two wings of the pod lay there, each held 3 peas. Tane broke off each pea, one at a time, and gobbled them up quickly. Because, he said, a yellow whiskery lion could come in from the garden and eat them. I think I've sown my seeds well. I hope you're doing that too. And thank you so much for listening to me.
I'm Bridget. I'm Bridget Mahy. I'm Margaret's daughter, and over the years I have joined Storylines and been involved, and have found myself in this slightly odd position of standing up in front of people in this moment of time, and wanting to say thank you very much to the recipient of the Margaret Mahy Medal. It was a wonderful speech. I luxuriated in the words and the ideas that came from Janice, and her vast wealth of experience in terms of working with grandchildren and pupils, academically and intellectually and professionally, and as a writer, and working with her creative spirit. So I appreciated that process because, of course, as I listened to Janice, I thought about Margaret, and I thought about how she was brought up, and how, for example, her father relayed a story of a great roaring Abyssinian lion, which she then realised one day she had kind of inculcated and she brought out in her own storytelling. And she came from a time when people entertained themselves much more possibly than they do now, in terms of she had uncles that played the violin, aunts that played the piano, they would sing songs and they would entertain themselves in their own home. And there may be more recitation or reading aloud. And as I listened to Janice, I thought about the transition of society and how that visual dominant feature of our world is changing or evolving. And we have to evolve with it or work with the children who are exposed to images in a different way possibly than we were. So I thought about that nature of the power of listening and how, as an audience, you all understand it, you acknowledge it, and the power of storytelling and the way that we listen to stories and then we pass that on to our children, and the fascination that children have with their own background. What did I do when I was 2? How did that happen? And they ask questions about their own basic experiences because we have to pass that on. We think about the power of words, and I think about Margaret, how she used to perform. She would do poetry out loud so the children could hear. She would read with her book, so it was by her side, so they had the word, they had the image, they had the voice, and they heard and watched and listened as a combination of elements. And I thought about how she drew that together, but we all do it naturally, as Janice has acknowledged, we all do it naturally anyway. Sometimes we're lucky enough to earn a living from it in a variety of ways. But it's very heartening to think that we all have this skill, and we may draw it out amongst ourselves. There was also another moment, Janice, when you were talking about Come Dance Around the World. And I had that story, it was called The Little Witch, as I grew up. And it's a gorgeous picture book. I'm very fond of it. And there's this wonderful image, and a girl, and the lines come dance around the world. And then Berta picked up that little narrative and played with the words and the imagery and the lines from the 1970s. And I found myself at one stage at a party in Wellington, and I noticed that I had gone to the right party because there was Bruno Lawrence at the same table. And I thought about it for a second. I went, Berta, that song, and my mother's bemused take on that song being lifted from her book. And I said provocatively to Bruno, I said, wonderful song that was translated by Berta. I said, did you know that she didn't receive any royalties for that? And Bruno, of course, was rather entertained by this. And as we batted backwards and forwards, I was being provocative. He very kindly slapped down a $5 note on the table and said, here you are. Thanks, mate. And so from that little story evolved, from the child's perspective to the adult's perspective, apart from the luck of going, yes, I'm in the same space as Bruno Lawrence, how lucky am I, and what can I make of it? So thank you, Janice, for that wonderful speech. I think it was covered a lot of thoughts that we all understand and appreciate within our world as well. And we have a lovely bunch of flowers for you. And accept.